Morning, Doug. How you doing today?
Doing great, Travis. Thank you.
Well, thanks for joining me again. Today we're going to do another podcast, and this one will reflect on some of the, or at least one or two of the boondoggles that have been sponsored by the county government. Ones that you and I have tried to stop and have been successful to a large degree, but unsuccessful in other ways. So we'll start off with that. And this takes us back to 2013, just shortly after you had been in office. You've been in office, I guess, almost a year now. This is a December 21st article. And we're talking about the county trying to obtain some land across the road, across Queensberry Avenue there, where a secondary runway would have planes would approach the secondary runway. And what we found was the county was trying to purchase this for years. It went back to 2005. And then we joined the fight there around 2013. So you might want to pick it up from there as you recall it.
Well, yeah, to summarize the map situation, the county supervisors wanted to have an easement to the shorter runway over into a private sector man's land, Mr. Chartrand. And the bottom line is there was a map indicating that we had what they call air easements, which means we could fly over it, as the map proved. Unfortunately, the county could not find the map. So Mr. Chartrand said, okay, you can't find the map. You can buy the land for about just under $1 million, which I said was absolute, travesty, because we had coordinates proving that we did have that air easement in other deeds. Long story short is they couldn't find the map. And when they couldn't find the map, instead of really making, I believe, a stronger concerted effort, they said, oh, let's just buy it then. That's only OPM, Travis, other people's money.
Other people's money. There you go.
It's the feds' money, it's the state money, and it's the county money. But
what was the percentage there?
Back then it was a 95-5, which means 90% federal, 5 state, 5 county. Now, again, that's all your taxpayer money, all of ours. It's not like the federal government has their own revenue generating stream. It's taxes is where they get their money from. The state, it's taxes where they get their money from. So I love it when these county officials and supervisors say, well, it's a 95-5, Doug. Yeah. Well, it's OPM, other people's money. No, it's yours, moron. Excuse me, I get a little passionate when they say when they try to say it's not their money. But go ahead.
So yes, so we found out that there was a map. The map was referenced on a whole bunch of other maps that we could see, and it was outlined where these easements were. And in the deeds, it even says strictly in those deeds of Chartrand's that the county had a right to go ahead and take down any trees or obstructions they wanted. But it seemed like the county was fixed on trying to get this land outright, and that perhaps even taking this to court would cost more than the $50,000 that it was going to cost them as their share of $1 million. So again, thinking of just their share, they pushed this, and they pushed it for years.
That's correct.
So they ultimately did get that, and
they paid Mr. Chartrand ended up just, I think, a hair under 900,000.
Okay, and that's where it stands today. So we then move on to the second boondoggle on the airport, which is the extension.
Yeah, now this one was a real killer to me also. So here we've got the county going and spending just under $900,000 of taxpayer money to buy some land that is basically useless. Okay. And we then turn to the next thing, which is the supervisors led by Stroud, some other supervisors that were so intent on extending the airport runway, thinking, oh, that will bring in all this extra economic activity, which is a total false narrative that they pushed. But they said, well, you know, for this airport project, we got to get some more land near the current longer runway. So they took a man's land through eminent domain. Eminent domain, for people who don't know, is basically government can take your land whenever they want. It's called eminent domain. Now they pay you, quote, fair value, and they take your land. You don't have a say in saying, no, you can't take it. No, we're taking it. And that's the way it is. Obviously, I was very much against that. This Vic Macri owned the land between the airport and Quaker. But they went ahead anyway. And they gave them what they thought was a fair value from some appraisals. But the bottom line is the man never even could object. He couldn't fight us because it's government. So, Travis, what do you want to add?
Well, I just want to clarify that you did mention the Quaker. So this is down at the other end of the airport. It's on the southern end of the airport. And
Correct.
this is going over the land that where the Walmart, the new Walmart is now occupying.
Correct.
There were some additional lands there, also owned by Macri, that where the people overflying runway 1 would overfly, and that's the area. It's interesting to go back in time and look at the negotiations with Macri before this, and what you'll find is that he was willing to give him the land that they were asking for free. He wanted to develop that into a industrial park,
Right.
but he needed second access. And he proposed to the county, if you let me build a road over your county land, this gives me a second access. I'll give you the land that you're interested in for the airport for free. So, but that wasn't good enough for him, I guess. Sounded pretty reasonable to me.
It sounded very reasonable.
So at any rate, we had a public hearing, which was pretty much of a farce. And they agreed to go ahead and take that land. And now, well, here we go. This is a meeting that followed the public hearing. And you had some comments here about that public hearing where they would refuse to answer any of our questions. And our questions really were bringing out concerns that we had, which they wouldn't acknowledge. So I don't know if you remember that public hearing.
Well, I do. And I remember it was very well attended. You know, Travis, it's kind of funny. It's hard to get anybody to show up for anything nowadays. It really is. We had over 60 people showing up for that meeting with the CNS engineers, and they had some questions, and I had some questions, and yet they refused to answer any question. Now, technically, at a public hearing, they don't have to at that type of hearing, but the correct civil and transparent avenue is to answer each and every question, and they refuse to answer any of those questions. It's an insult to the people who pay the taxes, who are residents of this county, and here we got a few supervisors up there trying to ramrod this boondoggle right through everybody and pretend like, well, it doesn't cost a lot because it's OPM. It's other people's money, which is your money. I get so upset with that.
Yeah, I do as well. So they did succeed in doing this, but it had some repercussions down the road because their assumptions that 95% of this was going to be paid by the FAA didn't turn out to be quite that. And this final slide here shows the accounting after Macri took us to court and got some additional monies. Now, these additional monies were paid 100% by the county of Warren because I have one more slide. Is what you'll see later is that the FAA told us that there was absolutely no need for the extended runway, therefore no need to take this land, and it is entirely the responsibility of the taxpayers of our county to come up with this extra money. You know more about this than I do. A lot of it, was behind closed doors, I think.
Well, we kept being told that the FAA will pay any additional charges to Mr. Macri, obviously the owner of the land, if a settlement comes to that. And I smelled BS from day one. I knew the FAA wouldn't pay the additional cost. I mean, I couldn't prove that, but common sense would tell me it wouldn't. And sure enough, Warren County got nailed for another over $500,000 in additional cost to Mr. Macri. Now, I don't blame him. He said, "Hey, my land was worth a heck of a lot more." And so he got a judge to agree. He wanted $1 million more. He got a judge to agree to right around $500,000. And that was all county money directly, county residents money directly. That wasn't even state money or federal money. So, they being the Warren County supervisors, like to try to hide that stuff. They like to try to keep that real quiet because it makes them look like morons. And they were. They kept voting for this. Take the man's land through eminent domain. And the end result was years later, the FAA said, first of all, we're not doing that runway extension boondoggle. There's absolutely no need. No need. And then Macri again saying, hey, I need to be compensated for my land in a fair value. And the judge agreed. Yeah, all right, I'll give you another $500,000. Warren County taxpayers, cough up another $500,000 to Mr. Macri. And again, I don't blame him. I blame the Board of Supervisors who kept pushing a false narrative. You want to add anything, Travis?
Well, it was not only false, but at that public hearing years before this now, we went ahead and were trying to say, we asked the question, is this land that you say is required, is that for the existing runway or is that for this runway that we think is not needed? And they wouldn't answer that question. To me, that was a huge, what are you taking the land for? Turns out there was a map that they wouldn't show me. Mark tried to get a hold of it. I tried to get a copy of it. There was some confrontations that went on because he wouldn't go ahead and give it to us. But that showed that what they were asking for, this land would only protect this extended runway, which again, we were saying there was no need for. So, we got absolutely nothing out of this. And yet here in 2019, this is the final death knell of that runway. We get a letter from the FAA, which we had been trying to get the attention of the FAA to comment on this for years, and they wouldn't. But finally, they go ahead and say an extensive review of this information determines that the existing runway length of 5,000 feet appears to be sufficient to accommodate existing and forecast operations at the GFL, which is the call sign for the Warren County Airport. A review of the submitted data confirms there is limited, if any, operational impacts for specific jet operators at GFL. This killed it. We never needed it. We've been trying to say that we've never needed it. The FAA had to be prodded by Elise Stefanik to even talk to us. And they never did talk to us. They just issued this letter at one point at the final end, after years of us trying to contact them.
It was 6 years.
Yeah.
And you know what's also ironic? These Board of Supervisors that were clearly in the wrong, knew they were in the wrong, I believe, yet kept pushing this false narrative. And as a result, the county was out millions. As a result, the county had 70 acres clear-cutted. 70 acres of trees were clear-cutted on the Warren County Airport land. And the moral fen, which is a dangerous, is a very limited moral fen, was put in jeopardy. And it's like 10% of all the moral fen in the world, actually. And from an environmental standpoint, it was going to be definitely harmed, if not destroyed. And they didn't care. Then because they knew their narrative was false, then they said, well, it's a safety issue. Well, Warren County Airport is one of the safest in the whole state, according to the FAA. So again, that false narrative of always trying to push a bad idea for a few people, a few supervisors, well, not a few, more than a few, kept pushing this and pushing it, and they would not allow the truth to come out. We kept trying, yourself very hard, myself, Mark Westcott, we kept pushing. Claudia Bramer joined us from an environmental standpoint, saying what a farce this was. And yet finally, after 6 years of fighting this, you're correct. The FAA said, this is basically a joke. You don't need another 1,000 feet. I called it the 1,000 feet to nowhere, the runway to nowhere. It was a huge boondoggle from an environmental standpoint, from a financial standpoint, and from an abuse standpoint. They were abusing the county residents. You want to add anything, Travis?
Well, you recognize it, but also the pilots that fly into Saratoga all this past several months, they recognize it too. Saratoga air traffic increases greatly. A lot of jets coming in from Kentucky, etc. And you would think that they would pick, these jets would pick the runway that's the longest around here. Well, ours is the longest around here at 5,000 feet before we extend it. Theirs is 1,000 foot shorter than that, yet where do they flock to? They flock to Saratoga, not just ignoring the fact that we're 1,000 foot longer. If we were 2,000 feet longer, it wouldn't be any different. So where the economics is here is, okay, why don't you move the track 20 miles closer to Glens Falls, and maybe we would get some economic activity.
What a great point, Travis. Here you got Saratoga, shorter runway, they tripled the amount of activity compared to Warren County in the summer months. Triple, 3 times as many jets going in and out on a shorter runway. Yet that Supervisor Stroud, some of these other supervisors kept saying, if we extend that runway, we're going to get all this activity. That is a false narrative based on a bunch of baloney. And it was proved that the FAA, even after, thank God, Elise Stefanik got involved, pushed the FAA to at least look at the data, look at the facts and data that you supplied. And the FAA said, you're right, there's no need for this. So the government, for once, made the correct decision. It only took 6 years in fighting it, but they did.
Well, I think that wraps it up for today, Doug. I want to thank you for trying to get this information out there. And there will be some other, unfortunately, there's no shortage of these examples. And we're going to be putting out some other podcasts in the near future. So join us then.
I'd love to.
If you would.